All right, we are recording. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. It has not been a long time for you because I'm behind on editing episodes, but I'm getting back into the swing of things. I think, as you know, Sarah, I have not been watching as many movies recently. And for the viewers at home, I have not been watching as many movies because I kind of burnt out a little bit. So I needed to take a break and watch other things. And yeah, but I've still been watching some things, and we have a few things to talk about after taking a couple weeks off of discussions.
Yeah, I've been watching movies still. Most of them I haven't really. I've been in a bit of a slump myself, but more in that I just haven't found anything that really spoke to me too much, or that I had anything too insightful to say. I kind of got through the LGBT stuff that was lighter and happier, and just have been floundering a little since then.
Yeah. Well, and those things are interesting, and I'm now starting to work my way through some of the ones you have recommended for me, which maybe we'll discuss later. But I guess we should start with Star Trek, Next Generation Season 2.
Now for something completely different.
Now for some television. It's not actually even a movie. So first off, I have to apologize to my sister Sarah for making her watch Up the Long Ladder.
Yeah, man. I mean, so Theo came up with a list of episodes that he wanted to talk about, and he put Up the Long Ladder on it, and I was like, isn't that the awful one? No, Theo wouldn't have put the awful one on this list, so I watched it, and I texted him, like, why are you making me watch this? This one's, I mean, not making me, but why was this on your list? It's terrible. This may be I would rather watch Sub Rosa any day over Up the Line. The only one that may be worse to me is Code of Honor.
I actually like Sub Rosa, but yeah.
You were like, well, I thought you liked that one, da-da-da-da-da. And then later you were like, no, I thought this was the one with Data. He was thinking of Ensigns of Command, which is in the next season, which I do quite like. Up the Long Ladder. Again, just to me, nearly as bad as Code of Honor. It is the one where the Enterprise encounters a really neat distress call, and they're trying to figure out what was going on because this ship apparently is from an era when they didn't keep very good records, and they're like, whoa, why does this ship have so many computers on it? And you think that's going to lead to something interesting, but it absolutely does not. Instead, it leads to some of the most offensive Irish stereotypes you've ever seen. Some insanely anti-science nonsense as Riker acts as though his virtue has been offended by someone asking if they can use his DNA for clones. He has a right not to want that. But the end solution is for the, there's two different groups of people. There's the insanely offensive Irish stereotypes, which are like natural and good because Earth and natural is good. And then there are the clone people who are all 5 clones over and over and over again. And they are unnatural and distasteful, and we hate them. And Riker, feels assaulted by their requesting his DNA. Later, they do literally assault him, which is not okay. But prior to that, but the solution is get this, the 2 groups to come together and the women to have 3 kids at least, with at least 3 different men. And Riker thinks this is like fantastic, much better than cloning. And it's like, maybe it is understood, but like the way this is done, it's not done well, on top of being, it's just awful. It's offensive and horrible, and I hate it. And it's like some of the logic in it, like the writing is so bad. It's like, because at one point they're like, well, they're going to fail in 2 generations. And it's like, well, what if we did give them new DNA? Well, it's going to be 15 generations. 15 generations? Like, are we talking like my great, I didn't count, but whatever, grandparents kind of generations? Because that's a long time. That's fine. There's no problem here. Like, so it's a terrible episode. It's a terrible, awful episode, and I hate it so much.
Yeah, it's more or less what you described there. I have only a few comments, which are that it definitely was not what I thought it was, because I was thinking of Ensigns of Command.
Which we'll talk about later. That's a great episode.
I somehow mixed this and that episode up with like two. I like added them together to create one episode in my brain, and then I like some aspects of it, just like pieces of it. Obviously, a lot of it is offensive, and the Irish stereotypes are like, yeah, this is weird and overdone, and like as similarly offensive to Code of Honor. It's like I don't object to the idea of like a culture, a group of spacefaring I don't know, Mennonites or something, just people who are like anti-tech and are just like whatever. In fact, that even shows up in a John Scalzi book I read that I quite like. But in this, it's like they take that idea and turn it into just like this weird Irish stereotype, and it's like
there's ways of doing cultures that are
even Code of Honor. There's a way of doing that episode. You have to change a decent bit of it to make it not horribly offensive, but they are both horribly offensive. The only thing I do kind of like that the solution is that they have to get these two groups together, only in that like there's all these hang-ups on like depending on once you get past season 2, there's not as many sexual hang-ups in Star Trek. Like Star Trek is a very sort of free-thinking show about sexuality and stuff like that, and the idea of like women having 3 babies and like that just being the answer and there being no hang-ups on it, I would like that idea in a better written episode, like just where you have to like to save a culture, you have to like it's just you have to have a lot of sex basically to save a culture, and I kind of like that idea.
I feel like that's a very 60s concept, and I think the idea of like you should be sexually free and not have sexual hang-ups is like something that certain people say to get other people to sleep with them, and I just don't think it's realistic or particularly not icky.
It's definitely icky in the sense of like everyone has to do it. That's why it doesn't exactly work. But like Riker,
they make a point.
Riker's sleeping with everybody.
They make a point of making sure the women are fine with it, which like okay, but it's just the disgust with which cloning is treated.
Oh yeah, just completely
is ridiculous. And I mean,
Oh, totally. It's completely. And again, I only like it in the conceptual phase, not in the execution or any of it. Just because, like, I like there's all this discussion now of I've seen a few different things about people who have multiple partners here on planet Earth now in today's world, and I've seen I've read different things that explore this idea because it's not a very common mainstream idea, and so this episode doesn't do it right. But I like the idea of Riker is really open sexually through the whole show and is kind of sleeping around with different people constantly. Mm-hmm. And it's his choice and he's doing it and we're fine. That, obviously the idea that it's forced enough the long ladder is bad or sort of forced.
Yeah.
I again, conceptually, I think the idea is interesting, but yeah, it just doesn't.
Right. And conceptually, I'm not against polyamory or multiple partners or having multiple children with multiple men. I mean, you do you. But when it's like a science fiction show that's suggesting that this is a solution to a colony problem, that's a different situation. That's not people deciding what kind of sexuality works for them, who they want to sleep with, and so on. That they pretend like it is, but that's because this writing is so crappy in this episode, and
it's very bad.
And anyway. If I never have to watch that episode again,
it will be too soon.
It's fine. Like I that is easily my second least favorite episode.
Yeah, it's probably
I'd rather rewatch The Child. I'd rather rewatch.
I'm trying to think of it because I have a bottom 3 now. I think, or I'm pretty sure I have a bottom 3. The first one doesn't count, so I have one that doesn't count. I don't count Shades of Grey because it's a clip episode, and those just aren't real. Mm-hmm. Like I don't count those in shows because they're not episodes of television. They're not even a full episode. So that gets thrown out. It's probably better than Code of Honor and Up the Long Ladder or something, but like I just don't count that because it's not. So like this and Code of Honor are definitely in the bottom. I'm not sure if there's a worse episode. Like The Child is pretty bad. Hide and Q is pretty bad.
I would watch either of those over that.
Probably, yeah.
I'd watch the Dauphin over that. Like, most of these I don't want to watch, to be honest. The Schizoid Man.
There's an episode in season 7 that I don't like. That's the one with the Native Americans where it's like,
yeah,
that's pretty bad.
Wait until you get into the movies, and then you have to watch RLM drag some of the movie verses, and that's one of the ones that they talk about. Anyways,
the actual whole season, though, we've talked a lot about the one episode.
Right. So here's something I want to say about the whole season that I realized. At some point, so I started watching Star Trek before The Next Generation, before it had concluded. And I think I must have recorded on VHS, because that was a thing we did at the time, season 2 at some point, because I know season 2 episodes better than a lot of other seasons. So there must have been a summer where, because they would syndicate, which was a thing back when television was a thing. And so every afternoon,
still syndicate, but
every afternoon they'd have a new an old TNG episode on, and they'd go chronologically. But it's why episodic TV was also a bigger thing, because that works better. Stranger Things, you can't just, and sometimes they'd skip episodes or do weird things. And I must have recorded season 2 because I do know it really well. I liked Shades of Grey as a kid because you got to see all these Riker clips. Like, as a kid, I was completely unaware of, that it was actually the result of like a writer's strike or something like that.
Yeah.
So I have a weird fondness for season 2, even though really it's not much better than season 1, and it has some terrible episodes like Up the Long Ladder and The Child, and I'm not sure I'd call Loud as a Whisper terrible or Schizoid Man terrible, but it's not very enjoyable either. So do you want to go from the beginning, kind of, and just?
Well, I have my whole statement on the whole,
okay.
Thoughts on the whole season, and then we can sort of go down the list. I think that season 2, on average, is like 1 point better than season 1 or something.
Okay.
Because I don't hate Loud as a Whisper, I don't hate Pen Pals or the Icarus Factor or Time Squared or any of these things, Unnatural Selection, whatever. Whereas, and I don't hate a lot of what's in season 1, but Justice is bad good. Data Lore is okay. Too Short a Season is not great. I'm just looking at these episodes, it's
those are season 1.
Those are season 1, and it's those are just a step down, where it's they're almost, a few of them are bad good, and a few of them are just not that interesting, and I have not a lot of reason to rewatch. Season 2 episodes are I probably wouldn't rewatch any of these, but I have a soft spot for Pen Pals, and I have a soft spot for Where Silence Has Lease, which I think you actually like more than me. But so it's there's more stuff in season 2.
I also think season 2 was more consistently hitting character notes in it.
Yeah.
Icarus Factor, I don't actually like that much, but it starts with a good Riker scene where he's making the eggs, and there's some really good Worf moments within bad movies, because it also has somewhere in there, I can't remember, maybe it's Samaritan Snare. I was watching it, and it has the thing where Worf's doing something intricate, and the doorbell buzzes and he just destroys it and shoves it away. It has all these nice, a lot of the B plots had some amusing character stuff in it.
Yeah.
So, sometimes you end up watching these episodes that are terrible on accident or not great on accident, and you're oh, but it has that character moment I really like that I never see because I don't like watching this episode.
Well, and
I don't feel like season 1 has much of that. Season 1, they were trying to figure the characters out.
Yes, and I think season 2 I think Gene Roddenberry is still more closely associated with this show in this season, and season 3 is where him and a number of the old writers sort of float off into the ether to do other stuff.
And it makes a big the writers make a huge difference for a show. I think writers have actually, with Netflix and stuff like that, with people like Shonda Rhimes and so on, writers have actually been elevated a little bit since then. And you can definitely see with Kurtzman and so on taking over Star Trek that it's gone in a completely new direction that a lot of people don't like, and some people do. It is what it is.
Yeah.
So season 2 definitely still suffered, and I think there was writing strikes going on and other stuff as well.
Weirdly, writing has become more elevated, but writers are making less money because shows don't go as long because there's not as much syndication, blah, blah, blah. That's back end stuff, which is interesting.
It's complicated.
The thing in season 2 is there's still a few kind of God episodes. There's still a few like Up a Long Ladder where there's like weird sex. There's like some kind of sex stuff with women and men. And like, I think in season 3, you finally get away from some of that stuff, which does feel more 60s, 70s.
Yeah.
By season 3, which is when I think that's 80, would that be 89 to 90? You actually start to feel like you're getting into like 90s, more of a 90s. It feels more 90s to me, I guess. Maybe that's because it sort of builds 90s. Those listening at home, Sarah has gone off to take care of a cat. But yeah, and so the directors, there are some directors, I think, who go from season 1 and 2 and work later. And a few of the first 2 seasons episodes are done by directors we like, but I don't know them as well. But let's get into the episodes.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing is actually season 2 has a couple of my favorite, I think basically 2 of my favorite episodes. I think I have to give her treats. Hold on one moment.
Okay, I'm pausing real quick. And we're back. So let's go through the episode. And yes, season 2 has several episodes that I actually really like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I have an episode list, though not in order of when they're released.
Yeah, why don't we kind of go slightly in order, though? Do you want to go?
Yeah, so
I do want
to.
Yeah, so there's The Child, which neither of us like. We don't need to say anything. I don't think we need to name every single one, but I'll hit the ones.
I do want to say for The Child is the rare Troy episode and is kind of the like epitome of like, they didn't know what to do with Troy. And we actually just, as a thing for the people at home, we watched RLM just released part 1 of like the best 5 TNG episodes or something.
Mm-hmm.
I forget what the title is. And they talked in there about how like Troy isn't very useful. And like, I think they're kind of right, but I also think they're being a little bit short-shrifted. Troy gets a few good episodes where she gets to do stuff. And in season 7 and 6, they start figuring out what to do with her. It's really season 7, but it's too late by then. Anyways.
Well, because they talked about one of the episodes we're going to talk about, one of that was on their list. They got halfway through their list. It was Mike Stikoska and Rich Evans talking. And they point out that Guinan often is kind of a better counselor than Troy. So, and that's just the writers. It's not Marina Sirtis or Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi Goldberg does a good job, but it's not like a fault of Marina Sirtis's.
It's not an acting problem.
I do like Where Silence Has Lease more than you. It is a God character episode. I just like the creepiness of it. It starts with them finding the Yamato, which is the Enterprise's sister ship. And there's just a lot of creepiness, and I like. Overall, it's not a great episode, but if you like creepy things in space, it has some good moments in it. And it doesn't have as bad moments as Up a Long Ladder does, because Up the Long Ladder starts with a nice bit of creepiness too. It just leads to
nothing. It leads to bad stuff.
It leads to bad stuff, whereas Where Silence Has Lease is just kind of mediocre at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think Where Silence Has Lease is meow. Where Silence
I think I just have to ignore her for a bit.
Yeah, Where Silence Has Lease. The effect is one of the reasons I just don't love the episode, is because it's just kind of funky looking, and it's like creepy, and then I see that, and I'm like, it's just weird. They didn't really know how to do. I
don't like it, but I think it's because I was like 8 when I first saw it, so I still have the 8-year-old's reaction to it, where it's kind of like, ooh, that's weird.
Totally, and there are a couple of moments in that episode where I feel like it's just they didn't fill. They're like trying to solve the problem, but they didn't fill in the spaces with enough like discussion or character moments. And I remember just feeling like, I guess I'm just staring at Riker and Picard as we're sort of going through emptiness here. But I have a soft spot for it. I kind of like it too.
Next is Elementary Data, which was on your list. I didn't rewatch it because I kind of have it memorized. So I think it's one of the ones I watched a bunch as a kid. I've watched it several times as an adult. It's actually not a favorite episode of mine, but it's a strong Geordi Data episode, which I think is why I like it.
I like it because it's Geordi Data, and because it's of TNG sort of does. It has a number of interesting holodeck episodes. and this is one of them, even if it's not a great episode.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I like how they use the holodeck,
Mm-hmm.
and I also like the aspect of where like, oh, we totally just coded this thing wrong, and now the numbers we're getting out are wrong. And because I'm doing a lot of stuff at work that involves me doing reports and like crunching this field into this field, but the fields are all named wrong, and so I don't know which field is supposed to go where. It's like, I totally get this episode, but the first half of the episode is kind of clunky and involves Pulaski sort of being like, you can't handle mysteries, Data. And it's like, well, Data's a member of the bridge crew and is constantly dealing with random stuff in space. So it's like, that makes no sense. But
Polanski is racist against androids, and it's never really it was a character trait they were giving her that wasn't a great one. And
no, and
I think it has an interesting moment in a later episode that we can talk about. I'm going to see if she wants to go back out on the patio. One moment.
Excellent. I'm pausing again real quick. And we're back.
Yeah, it's cat problems today.
Yes, it happens. When rewatching Elementary Dear Data, I didn't like it as much as I remember it, but I do like the holodeck aspects, the Geordi and Data aspects, and so like the second half of the episode is interesting, even if the first half isn't that interesting. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't think we need to say much about the next ones. We don't. They're not really ones we care about. The next one we care about is episode 8 of the season, which is A Matter of Honor.
Right.
Which is actually not one of my favorites again, but it's the one where Riker is recruited onto a Klingon vessel. There's like all these exchanges going on, and so
it's like Riker, an intern or something.
Yeah. But then meanwhile, Ensign Mendon, a Benzite, is on the Enterprise, and it's an interesting like culture clash episode, and it's also their chance to kind of go a little deeper on the Klingons, so that it's not, because we were talking earlier about you cultures end up being monolithic. It gets kind of like problematic of like all Klingons are the same, but like to a certain degree, you kind of have to like, and also cultures are a certain way. It doesn't, but individuals aren't. And so this was a nice episode where they showed that like there are individuals within the Klingon culture. There are different Klingons think differently and so on. And it is a good episode for that.
Yeah, and I also like there's A and B plots in television episodes depending on how the show works. Sometimes they're more or less integrated. This is an episode where I actually think they're really well intertwined because it's two different cultures that our Enterprise crew is trying to learn how to interact with. And I like how game Riker is to sort of try to interact with Klingons, and also how that helps him when he interacts with Worf, and sort of the humor that Worf gets out of the situation. And so I like the ways that the crew, the bridge crew, ends up interacting, or that Riker interacts with the Klingon crew, even with like even the sexual politics of him interacting with the Klingon women, and it's a little silly and stuff, but like I sort of like the whole thing there, and him eating their food and so yeah.
A couple more we don't need to. Oh no, wait, sorry. The next one is The Measure of a Man, which is widely considered one of the best episodes. And it's definitely one of my favorite episodes. It's the courtroom drama episode where Data may end up having to be taken apart by, I'm blanking on his name.
Officer Man, scientist.
Officer Science Man, who, and whether Data is the property of Starfleet. Maddox wants to take Data apart, but he doesn't necessarily seem very confident about being able to put him back together. Yeah. I just think this episode is really well written, like Code of Honor. It goes deep on something rather than like
Code of Honor?
I'm sorry.
A Matter of Honor.
Matter of Honor.
Code of Honor is very different.
Code of Honor is bad. Matter of Honor, where it goes deeper into a subject, and Data isn't just a robot. Data is kind of more mysterious, and what's really going on, and does he have, and it's a great questioning episode that doesn't have a conclusion either, to a degree. The conclusion is we don't know if Data is more than a robot, but it's not our right to decide that he isn't. And I thought that is an excellent conclusion. And
there's an episode much later, I think in season 6 or something, where they even interact with that again. And like, I like that it's the kind of problem where it is so confusing and kind of unknowable in that situation where you have to, where like you don't know, but you want to err on the side of what Picard is, and like you don't. Data certainly seems like a person, so you have to treat him like a person and not property, and how the episode turns, and when Guinan is talking to Picard, which is interesting because Whoopi Goldberg is playing Guinan, and how she's like, well, and Picard's like, oh, you're talking about slavery, and like it's interesting that it's a white actor and a black actor. Like there's lots of stuff in there even beyond the episode where it's like, oh, I feel like the writers kind of had an idea here, and like yes.
Oh, and it's fun because she plays into it a little bit. Like he's like, you're talking about slavery, and she's like, I think you're being a bit harsh. But it's very not coy the way she says it, but she's deliberately nudging him in that direction. And it has a great Patrick Stewart like power speech. But Riker also gets to do things. Riker gets stuck being the one arguing the Data is a machine who belongs to Starfleet, and it's just lots of interesting character moments.
Yes, and I agree completely, and I even like the resolution for Riker and Data, where Data is like, I don't have emotions this way, and also, you did what you had to, and like I like that Data resolves that. Mm-hmm. So, that's a great episode. That is a truly great episode.
The next episode we could talk about is Contagion, which is it's a very B kind of an episode, but it's one I like. I feel like I'm talking a lot here, so maybe I will.
I liked Contagion. I rewatched it because you mentioned you liked it. You take it. Yeah, so Contagion is so again, sister ship Yamato. It calls for the Enterprise, and so the Enterprise comes over because they're in neutral zone and they're having ship issues, and the Enterprise has come to help. The Yamato was looking for the I forget the name of them, Hakonin, so a lost civilization.
Hakona.
Hakona.
Well, no, wait, sorry, that's something different.
Anyways, and they're looking for that, and so Enterprise shows up, and immediately the Yamato ship blows up. It's like, oh no, we've lost everybody, what happened? And we're in the neutral zone, and then Romulans show up. And it's kind of an interesting setup because it's like, well, they're coming to help the ship. It blew up. We don't know why. Maybe there's an issue with, our ship with the Enterprise because it might be a Galaxy class ship issue, but it turns out that it's not. It's actually a computer virus. Mm-hmm. And I sort of appreciate that, like, there's two aspects to this. One, I feel like we didn't quite have enough computer culture because basically the way they solve it is they turn it off and turn it back on. Yeah. And they have it set back to a previous state.
Yeah.
Which is also how Data fixes himself.
Yeah.
And it's like, in today's world, that's like, oh,
the IT crowd made so much off of, have you tried turning it off and on again? But I worked for a computer consultant for a couple of years, and it got rid of at least half his client calls. So it's a thing.
Yes. And I'm curious, and I so there's that silliness, but at the same time, I almost appreciate that, like, that far into the future, that's no longer a thing you do. Like, the computers are so well built that that's just completely gone. I still don't know that I quite buy into the episode, but far future, who knows?
It goes
I do like the aspect where, like, there's even the danger of, like, oh, the Romulans might attack them, until you realize, oh no, the Romulans also downloaded information off of the Yamato and are now experiencing the issue. And I like the resolution at the end where Picard gets to go away and give his nice suave one-liner, and then Riker's like, oh, hey guys, Romulans, this is how you fix it. And I sort of like that, even though they're not at war, but they're, having issues, Romulans and humans, I like that Riker helps solve their issue. It's this idea that Starfleet is is trying to never be the aggressor, and they're always trying to have an outstretched hand, even to the Romulans, you know. So
we talked last time about like the one of your YouTube guys who did like my top 50 whatever episode.
yeah,
And one of the things I said is that the version of Star Trek I would create would be the space is weird and scary version.
yeah,
And I realized it even more watching the RLM stuff because, you know, I just don't care about the Borg that much. Like, they're great. I know why people like them as a bad guy. Like, I completely understand. But me personally, I really like the space is weird and the very episodic episodes, you know, ones that don't necessarily connect, ones that don't have these mythologies built into them. It's just my personal taste. And Contagion falls in that line where you find a thing happens, you'll never know what the whole story was, you move on.
I've watched 3 episodes of the original series of Star Trek, because I'm now starting to make my way through that. And so far they've all been space is weird and scary.
Yeah.
And like, in fact, the show feels more horror oriented almost than it does. It's like, it's a weird science as opposed to like space adventure. Like space adventure is probably more like Star Wars or something.
Yeah.
And Star Trek is like science adventure or something. I don't know. But like
that's going to change as you get further into it, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, and so like it's interesting because Contagion is almost like these first 3 episodes of TOS have not been great. There's a few interesting bits like salt vampires, but Contagion is like that kind of episode done well. Like where Silence Has Lease is another version of that, and it's not nearly as well done as Contagion is. Not that Contagion is great, but I do like the aspects you're talking about. So
yeah. Next episode is The Royale.
Right, which is one of our favorites. I don't know. I was looking online. It doesn't get talked about as much, it seems like. It doesn't show up on as many lists. But I think that's just she is so needy, this cat.
It shows up on B lists. You can find it on people who are like, okay, we've talked about The Inner Light. We've talked about Dharmak and Jalad. We've talked about Measure of a Man. Let's talk about some other odd episodes that are good. I've seen it pop up on those kind of lists.
Yeah, to be fair, I don't know if I like, of season 2 episodes, I don't know if I like this or The Measure of a Man more. But The Royale is so fascinating because it really is, like, we were just...
Give a short synopsis.
So, The Royale. So, I forget why, but the Enterprise shows up to a planet. I think they're following an old SOS from Earth, and they find a piece of a ship that says NASA.
No, they're following an old SOS from, I think, the planet even.
Yeah, from the planet. It's related because it's like one of the first. It's an SOS from the early exploration days of space, and they don't understand, you know, how it got out here, and they find a piece of a ship that says NASA on it, and so they get to this space, and they're like, oh, there's this weird space. Most of the planet is this stuff that we can't interact with, but there's this one space that we can. I guess let's beam down there. So they send an away team, which is Riker and Worf and Data, to the planet, and they get there, and it's like nothing but blackness. It's just all black, and then there's like some weird green stuff in the background. There's a cat in the background, and there's a revolving door, and they're like, what is that? Worf's like, what is that? And Riker's like, it's a door? I think it's Riker. They go in, and it's a hotel. It's the Hotel Royale. As the episode goes along, they figure out that the surviving member of this spacecraft ended up here and got placed on this planet by some godlike benevolent species. This is another God episode, kind of, adjacently. Benevolent, godlike benevolent. They stick him here, and they use this book that he has, this trashy, like, dime store, you know, it's not a mystery, but like a gangster novel, as their way of building up this hotel. And he's just stuck there living. He essentially grows old there and dies, and can't leave because they don't know that this is horrifying. And it's some really terrible dialogue, and there's a great moment with Troy.
Well, the book is badly written.
The book is badly written.
Like his like last journal entry is like, these aliens, they don't realize how poorly written this book was and how like an unending hell my life has been.
The reason I think this episode is better than most people say it is, or it belongs on like a list of an A list or something, or just like it should be thought of better by more people, is because it's the best kind of space is terrifying episode. Like, it's better than Contagion and Where Silence Has Least. I think we both like it more.
Yes.
And like, it's the best kind of that kind of episode where it's like, oh, space is horrifying, and it's horrifying because there's these godlike beings that took this guy and put him here, and were trying to be nice to him. And it's that thing where they didn't understand him, and we don't understand them. So it's like, it's both ways. I like that it's both ways, because that's almost what you get to with Q to an extent as the season goes on. Like, he doesn't fully understand humans. Humans don't fully understand him. They get closer after lots of interaction. But like, to me, the Royale. I'm glad we have season 1 and 2, because I think we get right the Royale because of season 1 and 2, because we have the space is weird and the godlike beings episodes.
Well, it makes me think of one of your favorite movies, which is based on a book. It makes me think of Stalker, which is based on Afternoon Picnic. Oh. And it's that in that general concept of Stalker, which is based on Roadside Picnic, not Afternoon Delight. I'm going in weird directions. But anyway, it's back there somewhere.
Yes.
But the general concept of that is like, maybe aliens stopped and had a picnic on our planet once, but because they are so alien, something weird happened on our planet. Yeah. And it's like and that's where I get why you're calling it godlike beings, because they are able to set up this whole thing. But this is way more, like, people love to, like, aliens are going to come and decide we're terrible and obliterate us because we're just monkeys that kill each other, which is like, I think that's unlikely. I think it's more likely that it's just going to be like, what is going on? Like, I don't understand. We have none of the same frame of references. So,
yeah.
I like that. And I always love it when good intentions go wrong. It's part of why I like the Prime Directive, because the Prime Directive is almost set up as like the we know good intentions can go horribly wrong, so we're setting these ground rules so that we don't screw things up with good intention.
Right. Well, yeah. And as a more modern version of Stalker Annihilation, which we don't love, it's okay. I
like the book.
I like the first book. The second and third book. The second book's okay. The third book's not my favorite. And the movie is okay. I like aspects of it. Anyways, but it's that idea where like something shows up on Earth and just changes things. You're right. And Stalker is even more like that. And yeah, and there's even an aspect to Stalker where it's kind of like there's almost a religious aspect to it, which there isn't as much in the Royale. There isn't really a religious aspect to it other than it's these all-powerful beings.
But that's why I like it, because it took away the Judeo-Christian, like, this God creature is going to, like, judge us stuff that's in a lot of these earlier episodes.
And that's part of, you're right, that's a part of why I like it and why I think it's quite good, is because it's, you take that aspect of it out of it, and they are just all-powerful beings, and they were just trying to help.
Yeah.
So, the Royale is a great episode.
And the last thing I want to say too about it, I wrote some things down. There's no false drama. It's low stakes. I do like the point where they're like, so we could do this thing. You would freeze instantly, but we'd get you back to the ship, and then we could defrost you. And Polanski thinks she could revive you. And Riker's like, I think you've given me motivation to figure out how to get out of here on my own. But it's also this it's also like a puzzle. It's a puzzle of an episode, because it's like a game. They're like reading the book. They're trying to puzzle out how to get out of this situation. And I like that aspect of it versus like, part of the reason I'm not into politics and maneuvering. I don't like tactic games. And I think a lot of the Borg and Romulan and so on episodes are more for people who like that kind of stuff. Yeah. Whereas this, they start the episode by talking about Fermat's theorem and like great mysteries and even to the extent that like they can solve the puzzle and get out of there because they have a ship that can beam it up. The guy who was originally stuck there, even if he'd solved it, he wouldn't have been able to get. So it works on that level. Yeah. And it's also a little bit of a Sisyphean nightmare because you assume that story was playing itself over and over again with him stuck in it. And I like Sisyphean nightmare. So The Royale is probably one of my top 10 episodes. It's just funny because it's not that much of a Star Trek episode.
To me, it's like, I get that. I think it's a Star Trek episode, but I've only seen TNG really. And it's definitely, it's like the off-brand Star Trek episode. Like, it still feels Star Trek to me because it's low stakes for a while, then it becomes higher stakes, but you're solving things through, like, it's like a word puzzle, or like not a word puzzle, like it's a puzzle game, it's like, that's what Star Trek episodes are to me. They're not really about like action and stuff. I mean, there are some good action episodes,
but they're reading a book to come up with the solution.
Yeah, which I like. Before we move on to the next thing, I forgot there's something in Elementary Dear Data, and you reminded me of it with the Riker thing and being frozen. In Elementary Dear Data, they're like, Geordi, can you solve this? And Geordi's like, well, I can do this, and it'll get rid of all the holograms. They're like, what would that do to people? And he's like, well, it would tear up human flesh too. And it's just such a bizarrely written section, and it's like, why
you
not
lead
say
with that? You lead with that.
Yeah. Well, you should be like, well, I could do it, but I'd also kill her. Like, yeah, that doesn't, anyways.
Well, that's just TV drama sometimes. It's the whole, like, come over here and look, I'm not going to tell you. Whereas, like, in reality, usually you'd be like, oh, you've got to see this man is doing, it's like.
Yeah.
So after the Royale, there's some episodes I don't think we're going to talk about. You said you have a fondness for pen pals, but did you want to say anything about it, or?
Not really. I just have a fondness for it. It's not a great episode. It's another cultures meeting, and Data. It's interesting. There's like good Data stuff in it, but it's a soft spot.
Did you want to talk about Q Who? You just rewatched it.
Moments ago,
Moments ago.
It's better than I remember it. It's the
introduction to the Borg, right?
It's the introduction to the Borg, and it's also, I think, where you understand that Guinan, I mean, we know she isn't, I think we learned she isn't human in earlier episodes, but it isn't until this episode that we realize that A, she's really old, and B, she's like something beyond us. Maybe we learned that earlier, but I think this is the first episode where it really hit me, and how she interacts with Q and how Q interacts with her is interesting, and also how Picard sort of handles the situation in both of them. It's all quite fascinating. And it doesn't quite, I think it's not a favorite of mine, or maybe necessarily a great episode, because there are low stakes in a way, because we kind of know that Q is just going to bat them back, because we kind of know he's going to send them away and then send them back. And I think it's good because it's the first episode where we learn that he's like kind of benevolent. Like, we learn that he's not just against them. It's the first time where we get the inkling that he's like actually more interested in seeing them progress almost. So like, there's a lot of interesting things in the episode, but I think there's an inherent lack in tension, and maybe that's why I don't like it as much as some other stuff. But it's still pretty good.
I think that's one of the ones the RLN, I think Mike picked that, right?
He might have, yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people like it because it's the beginning of the Borg. And again, that goes to, like, I completely get its importance in Star Trek canon, but I prefer the funnier Q episodes. And I just, I'm just not that into the Borg and all that. Like, I'm medium. Don't overstate it.
I like that we bounce over to the Borg ship and they just don't care about the Enterprise people. And like, I appreciate that it felt like the Borg were thought out pretty well. And I think that's why they're so memorable to people. And I think I like them going over there, and sort of the Borg is only interested in their technology, and the Borg babies, which are really odd, but kind of interesting. So I just like all those aspects. I like all those aspects of it. So it's definitely still a good episode. I just don't quite like it, I guess, as much as like, the RLM guys did or whatever, but it's pretty good.
The next one is Samaritan Snare. I'm going to take a hit for this one because I think this is one of the ones I liked as a kid. And as an adult, I'm kind of like, I've had people point out that the Enterprise, the whole Packlets is kind of stupid. They're stupid. The concept behind them is, so the Enterprise, so Wesley and Picard go on a long shuttlecraft trip together because Picard needs his heart transplant fixed. This may be one of the earlier mentions of that. And I like that part. I like that Wesley is kind of like, what am I going to talk to him about? Like, there's this discomfort of throwing these two people together that's interesting, and I like that. Then there's what is actually, I think, the main plot, which is the Enterprise helping the Packlets, and then the Packlets take Geordi prisoner. The Packlets are very stupid, and the Enterprise, it's not a great plot. The Enterprise isn't very smart to assist them. I think I always liked it because, again, it was one of those the best of intentions getting you in trouble kind of situation. Like, they think they're being benevolent and helping the Packlids when really the Packlids are kind of evil. The problem is it makes the Enterprise crew look pretty stupid. There is an aspect of that where I like the idea of not being on your A game. Like, we all make dumb mistakes. Everyone, very smart people make very stupid mistakes, but it's not really played that way. I mean, Worf is just like laying out all the reasons, like, this is a terrible idea. And they're like, nah, and do it anyway. So it's kind of bad because, like, it's almost like Worf should have been off the bridge when it happened and then come back on and been like, you did what? Like, something like that should have happened and it could have worked better.
Yeah, I haven't rewatched it. I kind of stuck it, like, I have these internal lists I keep that are not for anyone that I just sort of, to keep it in mind, like, kind of what I like. And it's above all of the, like, chaff of season 2, but I haven't seen it in a little while. And I remember when I first watched it, I was like, okay, I'm going to give this one more credit because Sarah seems to like it. And now hearing you say this, I'm like, yeah, I think it's probably, like, the top of the chaff, but maybe not.
It's not great.
Yeah.
So let's keep going. Up the Long Ladder was next, but we have really covered that one very well.
Yes.
I do want to mention we didn't watch or talk about Manhunt, which is the next one. It's another Loxana Troy one.
Right. I don't remember that one very well.
Hers are always fun. We didn't rewatch it. I don't have much to say about it, but it is a Loxana Troy, and they're usually kind of fun.
Yeah, I'm sure she's always fun.
The next one is The Emissary, which we also didn't rewatch. I don't remember it very well, but it does have the appearance of Kalar. Who is important to Worf's story. Yes. And I think she's kind of an interesting character, and it was always kind of a shame there wasn't more of her.
Yeah, that's an episode that, again, is interesting ideas. It just doesn't develop a lot in that episode, and they don't do a lot with it in the season, so it's maybe a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I'd have to watch it again to really say more about it. I'm just remembering that aspect of it. The last one we really want to talk about is the almost last episode of the season, except for Shades of Grey, which is Peak Performance. Do you want to...
I don't remember it super well. I didn't manage to rewatch it before this, but I remember liking it a fair bit at the time because Data loses at a game. That's and, he's a robot, and so you think, well, like, he has... But, of course, there's the intricacy of, like, I've always been curious because robots can do amazing things, but then you get to something where, like, it has to turn left, but it doesn't have that program written. It can't turn left. So, like, Data, like, well, once you add in all these things, how much computing power and blah, blah. And so, like, it's interesting that Data loses to this guy in a game of chess. Or, well, not chess, but something
Strategema.
Like that.
Strategema.
And at the same time that Data's having this slight B plot, the A plot is, I think, that the Enterprise is...
Let me give it a rough, because you haven't seen it. So I basically the Enterprise is doing, and part of why I like this episode is it's almost like the RLM guys were kind of covering the different kinds of episodes there was, and this is almost like a day in the life kind of episode. Yeah. They're doing something a little unusual for them, but it's just part of being, a military vessel. They're doing like strategy maneuvers. They're kind of like seeing how they're doing,
Well, they're not military; they're explorers. But yes.
Yeah, but they're basically military. But anyway, so there's this old derelict ship. Riker gets to pick a crew and take them over, and they're going to just do some little silly maneuvers to kind of see where everybody is. And there's a Zakdorn strategist, Sirna Kolrami, who's kind of overseeing it because they are excellent at strategy. And some Ferengi show up, stuff goes bad, but it's interesting because it's a good character episode again.
Yeah, that's
and
what I
you just talked about is this guy Kolrami is really good at this game. Riker challenges him immediately, and it's an interesting Riker episode because Kolrami is really and Picard are kind of arguing over how competent Riker is. But then it's an interesting one. It's I like the Polanski aspect because she's so racist against Data But she gets him into this game, and Pulaski, I keep calling her Polanski. It's Pulaski. She gets him into this game. She was only in it for one season. I don't need to remember.
Also, you keep saying racist, but I think it's technically prejudice. Although
yeah,
it's that's a constant. Anyways.
Well, yeah, okay.
Yes.
She's prejudiced against androids. I don't know, man. She seems like she would have handed Data off to Maddox given a chance. Like
possibly
not a good look. But she gets him into this game, and he loses, and he suffers from this like confidence issue. And Pulaski actually regrets it. Like, she has a moment where she kind of thinks of Data as more than just a machine. Yeah. And that's kind of nice. And there's a nice scene where, like, Troy tries to convince Data to get over it. And Pulaski tries to convince Data over it. And finally, Picard has to do it. And it's kind of, Picard's, part of the point is that he's not that great with people. And, Data's not a person, but he kind of is. So it's nice to see Picard, like, have to just step up to the plate and be like, you're doing this. And yeah, Data's overthinking everything. And I appreciate that as someone who overthinks everything, knowing that he knows that we know that he knows that we know.
Yes.
So I like that aspect of it too.
You pretty much covered everything that I like about it. So I completely, and I like the resolution of the episode, which has always been one of the most. It's actually the resolution for, so spoilers for Doctor Strange, the movie. One of the few pieces I liked in that movie, and is that at the end when Dormammu is taking on Doctor Strange, the resolution is that basically Doctor Strange isn't going to fight him. He's just going to make it. He makes this loop, this Sisyphean time loop happen, and Dormammu is annoyed by that, so he goes away. And I kind of like those endings, because that's the ending here where Data's like, well, I'm not going to try to win. I'm just going to try to stall. And there's, even as a kid, I had a chess game once where I was losing and I forced a stalemate, and this guy was upset. He was like, how'd I do that? And he got so upset and he went on a losing streak. So there's also like a personal aspect for me, because I like appreciate, that whole aspect. Anyways.
Yeah.
So does that cover all the episodes?
Next, the last one is Shades of Grey, which is a Riker Clip episode where he gets bit by a tree. Or a vine?
So. Yeah.
I like that. It's stupid. But you know what? I would watch that 10 times or more before I watch Up the Long Ladder again. So yeah, that covers season 2.
Yeah, I'm excited for, we'll probably the next 2 or 3 weeks we'll watch season 3 episodes. And we'll have more to talk about, I think, because I'm going to see
if Luna will watch some episodes with me and have more to contribute instead of what she's been doing.
Excellent. But like, I'm looking at the list and I'm like, we're still not at, I think season 4 is where there's a lot of stuff that I like, but like, I remember a lot of these episodes better. And like, I'm just looking at this list and I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of good stuff here. Like, I haven't even.
In season 3 or 4.
Season 3.
Yeah, season 3's got great episodes in it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to season 3 a little. Like, I'm enjoying doing season 1 and season 2 because it's interesting to pick the little bits you like out of it. But like season 3 is like, oh, there's a lot more for me here to get into. Anyways,